Welcome, everyone. Pleased to have you join us for this initial session of a series, a three-part series, Inventions, Inventors, and Inventing. I'm Dr. Richard Cahoon, a faculty at Cornell, and spent 20 years as Director of Technology Transfer at Cornell. Prior to that, I was an inventor, have a U.S. patent, and I have spent several decades working with inventions, many inventions, and over the years I developed, of course, a working knowledge of inventions of all different kinds, and through that time developed a real appreciation for the act of inventing and inventions themselves. I'm joined today with a real great panel of colleagues who share my passion about inventions. We have brought them together virtually. Catherine Hulick, a science journalist, Jay Bennett, also a science journalist, Jan Bjorn Posthast in Germany with the German Patent Office and historian, and Rebecca Oakes, the historian for the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. All of my colleagues share a deep interest in inventions, the fact that around us, we are always surrounded by inventions. Most of the time we take them for granted. Oh, we hear about the big inventions of the wheel and the internet and anesthesia, these big, so-called big inventions that transformed humanity. And those are fascinating, transformative, but surrounding us are millions of small incremental improvements that make life a little safer, a little more healthy, a little more pleasant, make the planet a better place. They are all around us. And they're a testament to the problem-solving creativity of the inventors that created them. But they're more than just solutions to problems. They really are a testament to the human spirit of creativity and of caring. And behind practically every invention I've ever worked on is a story that is illuminating for one reason or another, and oftentimes surprising aspects of the invention and of the inventors that made them. I've asked each of our illustrious panel members to bring a story. They've all written, investigated about inspiring invention stories, and I've asked them to bring some stories to share with us today. And that should provoke some questions from you out there in the audience, and should probably stimulate questions amongst ourselves here in the show. So with that, let's share a little bit of this creativity and this wow factor, I call it, with inventions. And I'm going to start by turning it over to, we'll go through each of our panelists and ask them about their story, and why they picked it, and a little bit more. And then when we're done, we're going to have a roundtable discussion. And you are all encouraged to bring your questions, send your questions to us. With that, I'd like to ask Jan to present his story. And also, if everyone would just tell a little bit about themselves before you launch into your story. So, Jan?
Well, thank you very much indeed. Yeah, my name is Jan Björn Potters. I'm working for the German Patent and Trademark Office. I'm an editor. there for the web page, and I'm a historian by train. And I picked out a little historic example of how the process of invention can sometimes be started in an unusual way. In this special case, from top to down, I would like to talk about King Ludwig II of Bavaria, sometimes known as the fairy tale king of Bavaria, also known as the Mad King, some call him, who reigned from 1864 until his mysterious death in 1886. And now Ludwig was a special character who wanted to live in a kind of a dream world inspired by the operas of Richard Wagner and medieval knight tales. Yeah, we got a picture of him there as a young man. And he wanted to have his dreams turned into stone in the shape of his world famous palaces, the best known of which is probably Neuschwanstein Castle. You might have seen the shape, maybe it's inspired Disney's Mickey Mouse Castle too. And they were recently declared a UNESCO World Heritage, actually, only this July. It's brand new, yeah. So to make his dreams come true, Ludwig inspired and spurred technical development. He was not interested in the technology itself, but only in the effect it would have. However, he had the means to inspire engineers and to achieve pioneering feats in order to realize his dreams. And here we got a curious object. It's a sleigh. It's called a Puttenschlitten, like a little angel sleigh. And this device was probably the very first ever electrically lit vehicle, well, maybe in the world, but definitely in Bavaria. It had a it had a light bulb right on top of it. You see this little kind of mast shaped thing over there. And there was a light bulb in there, a real light bulb, which was absolutely brand new back then. It was back in 1880, just developed by Mr. Edison. And we don't know yet for sure how whether the filament of this bulb was made of carbon or platinum, but we definitely know that the battery was put under the seat of the king, and they had a box there, and the battery probably worked on the basis of chromium sulfuric acid. So we had the very first ever vehicle with light there, and you see this romantic picture of how the king would like drive around in the night in the Alps in the snow, and yeah, and he would take the sledge to go to his palace at Linderhof, and there we got a famous installation. It's called the Venus Grotto. This is a unique, we call it a Gesamtkunstwerk, a total work of art. It was commissioned in 1875, and this offers us an incomparable insight into the early history of electricity and lighting. It was equipped, among other things, with a wave machine, an artificial wave machine, an artificial waterfall, a rainbow projection apparatus. We don't know how this one worked, it got lost, but it sounds very interesting. Artificial stalactites, heating, and all the stuff. And it was built by using an innovative shell technology made of wire mesh and cement. The architect name called August Dirichel even obtained a patent for his construction method in 1879. We can see the picture right here. So Ludwig was a visionary, like I said, and pioneering and exploiting the potential of new technology achievements, especially electricity. And so in Linderhof, we got the very first ever power station in Germany. And that was built just to lighten up this grotto of his, yeah. So he had 12 dynamos powered by a steam engine, and he's supplying a device called an arc lamp. And yeah, you can see like it's the interior of the grotto in red light created by this arc lamps. And that was inspired by an opera of Richard Wagner called Tannhäuser. And he was especially interested in recreating the famous blue grotto of Capri in Italy, and he needed a blue for that, a special blue. They called it a bluer blue. And by demanding this kind of bluer blue, which you can see on the picture now, he drove the technician to despair because they couldn't just make it right. He was never satisfied. And eventually they asked a new founded company, the Badische BASF company, which is still existing today, still a big thing, if they could create such a blue for him. And we don't know if they eventually could please the king because he died very suddenly and under mysterious circumstances. But 4 years after his death, BASF applied for a patent for the synthesis of the indigo dye. So this was an interesting thing, and also the quest for the right color inspired the very first ever German patent, the DA number one, and it was a method to create a certain red ultramarine color. And so Ludwig kind of sparked off, yeah, a lot of technical development. Although he didn't care about the technology, but about the effect, and by this, like he initiated a certain development. Yeah, I just like to mention that there was also one of the very first German telephones on Neuschwanstein Palace. It was installed there. It was probably the very first in the country, as well as yeah, Neuschwanstein. Here you see it now, as well as water flushing, electric bells, and an innovative heating system. Yeah, that was my little example about how top-down strategy to spark innovation.
Yeah, it. I haven't known about these stories, so this is the first time I've heard them, and really quite eye-opening. And it does remind us that inventions are often created by, as you say, the top down, where there will be some mission established by some individual or an entity with a lot of resources, and some, whether or not you agree with exactly what the mission is, it does employ engineers, scientists, creators, and inventors. And the first thought I had was sort of the similarities of what has happened with when the US government decided to go to the moon. So we spent billions and billions of dollars, and some people would say, why did we go to the moon? And that's still, I guess, a debatable question of why one would go to the moon, although we're going next year, I think. But what it spawned was dozens and dozens of different inventions of all kinds. Some might even say the semiconductor, et cetera. So it's a fascinating area of stimulation of inventions. So thank you. Thank you, Jan. And anybody wants to go learn more about some of Jan's work, go to the German Patent Office website, and you'll see more of his fascinating stories. And we may get to some later. I'd like to move on then and ask Catherine for your story.
Yeah, so my name's Catherine Hewlick. I'm a science journalist and author. I write for Science News and Science News Explores, which is a spinoff for younger people. And actually, most of my career has been devoted to writing about science for kids and teenagers. And I love writing for this age group because kids are naturally curious about the world and they're natural experimenters and inventors. They, unlike grown-ups, don't really worry about whether an idea is silly or weird most of the time. So that lets them really get their creativity out. And I just love engaging with that creativity and sense of wonder about the world. I think kids are just as smart as grown-ups. They just don't have as much patience. So I really look for stories that are going to capture anyone's attention. And so I brought two stories to share with you all. I picked these stories because I think they both kind of reveal something about how inventions happen. I think the most fun kind of invention story maybe to tell is when it's an accidental discovery. So everyone knows about penicillin, but there's accidental discoveries happening all the time. And this one I wanted to share. I think there's a video of it we can share. There it is. It's real life Spider-Man silk. So, what kid wouldn't love to hear that that was invented? And this was an accident. You can see there, it's coming out as a liquid and then it's hardening. And you'll see it's strong enough actually to lift something 80 times its own weight. In this video, it's lifting up that beaker. So yeah, it's very cool. It looks just like what Peter Parker would shoot out of his wrists and catch a bad guy with, although it is not strong enough to hold a person, at least not yet. But yeah, it looks just like something that's in the movie, and it didn't exist before. This is the first time anyone had made an adhesive that could shoot out like that and harden and lift something up. And the person who invented this, Marco Lopresti at Tufts University, he works on adhesives and he works with liquid silk, which they make by taking cocoons from silk moths, not spiders. It's from silk moths, and they boil them down and make this liquid. And he was actually trying to invent an adhesive that would stick underwater. And he especially works on natural adhesives. So he's trying to get away from, toxic chemicals and that kind of thing. And so he's working on this underwater adhesive, and he was cleaning some of his equipment with acetone, and he noticed that the liquid he was working with just suddenly turned solid. And to him, it looked like a web. And this kind of vision, he had this vision almost right away of a web shooter like Spider-Man. And so that's what he made. And they don't really know what it's for yet. That's kind of the fun thing about accidental inventions is they made this thing, they demonstrated it, and they don't really know yet what it's going to be useful for, but hopefully someday we'll find out.
Mhm.
And I had brought another story as well. This one's quite different. In another way that inventions often come together is when people from different fields and different backgrounds put their heads together. And so what you're seeing here, is a person who was practicing the piano, and they were practicing a very difficult pattern to play on the piano. And then they wore this kind of robotic exoskeleton. And yep, there they are wearing the robotic exoskeleton. And then when they tried that same very difficult phrase again, they could play it faster than before. And the control group that didn't use the robotic exoskeleton, they did not get any faster. So this really weird kind of robotic hand was actually able to improve their ability to practice and play the piano. And this invention came about because Shinichi Furuya at Sony Computer Science Laboratories, he's a pianist. And he actually had to stop playing for a while because he developed a movement disorder in his hands from practicing too much. So now he's working in this company where they, develop all sorts of robots. And he's like, well, maybe a robot could teach people how to move their fingers. Maybe that could, relieve some of this, repetitive stress type injury. And actually, in rehabilitation and therapy, there are doctors using similar types of things to help people recover, but no one had really thought of using this to improve a healthy person's skills. And it took someone who's a piano player coming into that space of robotics to kind of make that connection. And so that's another way I've found that inventions often happen is when people from different backgrounds kind of come together, and all of a sudden a roboticist sees a need that they never even knew existed, that piano players might want to use this thing. And unfortunately, this is not available for anyone to use at home yet. A lot of the piano players in the study wanted to bring it home, but it's still just a prototype. But again, like this type of robotics, this is very cutting edge. Being able to even move fingers like that, like with like those small pieces, like this is very cutting edge of robotics. So it's really exciting to see. And the people who invented this do envision it being useful for more than piano. Like anyone who has some sort of job that requires precise finger motion could use a robot to help train themselves to do that motion, like a surgeon or even a baseball pitcher, like learning their grip. So I really love discovering and telling true stories about new inventions in science, but I'm also an author, and I just had a book come out for kids that has invented inventions in it. It's a science fiction book called The UFO Files. So kind of everything I learn about real inventions kind of inspired me in this book, and I imagined all sorts of alien technology that's all rooted in reality and the kinds of real things that inventors are working on. For instance, there's a fusion engine on the ship. So that's inspired by, real research. Right now, people are trying to invent real fusion reactors and fusion engines. So this book is great for kids, I think about age 7 or 8 and up. It's told in like a graphic novel style, and all throughout there's like real scientific information in sidebars that kind of lets kids get into the background of all this cutting edge research. And so that's the other reason I write about inventions for young people is I want to inspire them to, not just imagine cool things that could exist, but to go into fields where they could make that a reality.
I can also relate to the, inventions and children. They really get inspired. I've taught in as a guest visiting teacher in 2nd grade and 5th grade, and they get really inspired. And it's interesting, as you say, kids don't know sometimes that they don't know how to invent. They just do it anyway. They're not afraid to try things. And So one thing I wanted to mention, you mentioned the accidental invention or an invention that is a solution to a problem that we're not sure where it is. I've had a number of those. It's actually a very exciting and fun thing to do, is to take an invention to try to figure out where it fits. And I know, Jan, maybe you might want to just quickly mention you had a story, right? Do you want to mention that about the accidental adhesive?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's a very very famous thing that everybody is probably using in his office or at home. It's talking about the post-it sticker. In the late 1960s. Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah. The chemist Dr. Spencer Ferguson Silver was working for the 3M company and development of adhesives. And his new adhesive was supposed to be particularly tough and strong, but it turned out that it was rather weak because it stuck easily on smooth surfaces, but it was just easily removed. So it didn't really help much, and he didn't know what to do with his invention. And so for years he kept on thinking about it, and then one of his colleagues, called Art Fry, I guess was his name, years later came up with the idea of how this invention could be useful. Like he was singing in his choir, church choir, and he was annoyed that at every rehearsal the bookmarks that slipped out of his sheet music. So and then he remembered the idea with this glue that would easily to be removed, and so that's together they started working out this idea and developed the famous sticky notes. And it became apparent that this was a classic case of a product that no one knows they need until they see it.
Yeah, yeah. And, now that I've been working on inventions for decades and working with inventors, sometimes I would say more often than not, the creativity begins almost after the invention is first made. The invention's made, and then it's the creativity of how it's applied and combined with other inventions, and where you go find its home. So it's just such a rich subject, the invention, the web of inventions. Thanks, Catherine, and happy to see the book. I would like to then ask Jay. Jay, what story would you like to share?
Well, hello, everybody. Thanks for having me today. My name is Jay Bennett, and I'm a science journalist. I primarily write about space and physics topics. And one thing I've always been fascinated with is time and the measurement of time, which is a field known as metrology. And so I'm going to attempt to tell a short history of clocks and time measurement, and how that has led to a number of unforeseen applications and kind of inventions that have changed the world. And so the first clocks that we know of were sundials. And so time has always been intrinsically linked to the rotation of the planet. And the first clocks that we know of that were not using astronomical movements to measure time are water clocks. And so these are vessels that had a hole punched in the bottom so you could use the water descending as a way to measure a duration of time. Mechanical clocks came about in the medieval time and were installed in churches. And the word for clock actually comes from the Latin word clocca, which means bell. And so the bells ringing in these medieval churches gave clocks their name. And individual towns would keep their own individual time until the 19th century. And then in the 19th century, we had railways that needed to be connected, needed to be synchronized for their train schedules. And that's when time zones were first developed and timing was kind of standardized around the world. And at this time, so in the 19th century and into the 20th century, astronomy is still used to define the second and to define time. And so a second is understood as one about 86,000th of a day. The problem with that is that Earth's rotation varies. It can vary based on the amount of precipitation or snow melt at the poles. And so it's not consistent. And so in the year 1952, they had the bright idea to change the definition to be about 131 or 132 millionth of a year. And that was not a very practical way to define the second. And so this is when physicists started to think, well, maybe we should kind of disentangle our measurement of time from the astronomical movements because they take too long. We don't really have a good precise measurement. And so the key breakthrough that led to atomic clocks and atomic timekeeping was made by Isidore Rabi. He was a physicist at Columbia. He received the Nobel Prize in 1944 for developing a way to measure an atom's internal resonance frequency. And what that means is that all atoms, when they're hit with electromagnetic radiation, so light or microwaves or UV or infrared, depending on the type of atom, will undergo some sort of transition. Most commonly, the outer electron bumps up to a higher energy level. And then when it comes back down, the atom releases that exact same frequency of light. And Rabi surmised at that time that this could be used to build a clock. And the way that that works is that you build an apparatus to trap atoms, hit them with the correct frequency of electromagnetic radiation, and if they transition, that tells you that you have an extraordinarily precise measurement of that frequency. You know that you're spot on. And then you can run that frequency through electronics to count out a duration of time. And so this technology developed. Cesium was the atom that was chosen as kind of the most practical to use for this purpose. And then in 1967, they redefined the second again to be about 9 billion cycles of the frequency that will cause cesium to transition, of its internal resonance frequency. And so at the time that all this fundamental physics was happening, there wasn't necessarily a sense of all of the things that this would change, but one of the most significant is that this facilitated GPS satellites ultimately. The first GPS system came online in 1993. It was a military project before it was publicly available. And to make GPS work, you need to have precise enough timing that the satellites, which are orbiting the planet, according to Einstein's theory of general relativity, have time passing at a slightly slower rate relative to us on Earth. And this will cause the GPS satellites to drift unless you correct for it. And you need atomic clocks to correct for that. The picture that you see, or that was recently up, is the current clock that is used in the United States to define civilian time. It's called NIST F1. It's in Boulder, Colorado. And it still uses cesium. And even though, we have stuck with the same reference atom to define time, the clocks themselves have really advanced. And this is the most modern version of the cesium clock that we have today. Actually, I believe just earlier this year or last year is when it officially came online and started officially defining time for the United States.
So when Jay mentioned that he was working on this, the endeavor, to improve the atomic clock and timing. First of all, my reaction was, my experience, inventors are inventing in so many different domains, whether it's agriculture, human health, food science, pet food, whatever. There's all kinds of things. And I hadn't thought about time, that people have been inventing methods. Of course, it becomes obvious that they have been doing that. But the idea that somehow time could be enhanced and improved and invented on is just kind of a fascinating and mind-blowing thought. And of course, I get a lot of laughs when I tell people that there's the potential that the second could be improved one way or another. But it does remind me, too, a comment that I'll make now, and that is one of the the stories I was perhaps going to mention was the story of the invention of a new form of electric motor that came out of Oxford 5+ years ago, something like that. And it was an improvement, an invention, an improvement of the Tesla rotary electric motor, which we hadn't seen. No one had invented an improvement on that basic rotary design. And now that type of very different structure and operational electric motor has found itself into what's called Yasa Motors, which was spun out of Oxford just a few years ago and then bought by Mercedes. And Mercedes is now taking that design and using it to build lighter, flatter motors that it's putting into its vehicles. So, you know, here you think that we've just about invented all we could with the electric motor, and lo and behold, an improvement. And so inventors continue to amaze us in time and electric motors. And they're inventing in all kinds of different areas. So with that, I'll ask Rebecca to share your story.
Thanks, Nick, and hi, everyone. Good afternoon. So my name is Rebecca Oakes. I'm the lead historian at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. And I love hearing all of the different inventions in different areas presented here today, because when I started working in the field of invention history, really stuck out to me just how broad of a brush inventors have painted throughout our shared collective history. Coming into this field, I actually have an academic background in the long Civil War era, so I wasn't necessarily a historian of innovation before I started work here at the USPTO. So I was always kind of drawn to and fascinated by stories that were a little bit unique and a little bit different, not necessarily what people most commonly think of when they think of an invention. So most people think of some things like the light bulb and the telephone. And I was always fascinated by the stories of unique inventions that have an association with the field that you wouldn't expect a patent or an invention in. So with that in mind, one of the most unique inventions that I've come across in my time is actually the design patent for the Medal of Honor. And this story kind of stems back towards my bread and butter, the Civil War era. The Medal of Honor used to be the only mechanism that the United States government had to recognize valor during war. And in the post-Civil War era, not only do you have were recipients of the Medal of Honor recognized, but Civil War veterans were also forming organizations and political groups, and each of those organizations wanted their own medal in order to recognize their membership, which is all well and good. But the problem was they started looking for inspiration from existing medals, and the only medal that they could really find was that designed for the Medal of Honor at the time. So these organizations actually started almost carbon copying the Medal of Honor, or at least portions of it, for their own membership medals. And the result was that the integrity of the Medal of Honor was really degraded because there were so many almost copycats, even if they weren't necessarily intending to do that, floating around from these different organizations. So in 1904, or in the early 1900s, Congress recognized this as a problem, and they decided that they wanted to redesign the Medal of Honor. And they chose a man named George Gillespie to do this. Gillespie was a Civil War veteran himself, and he actually had received the Medal of Honor for his actions during the war. And he was a career soldier, so he was still working with the Army he was an engineer with the Army at this time. So Gillespie spent about 2 years seeking input from sculptors. He sought input from other Medal of Honor recipients and worked to redesign the medal. So he drafted and finalized this new design, and in 1904, it was approved by Congress, and then he chose to protect that design with a design patent. So how a design patent differs from a utility patent, which is what the majority of patents granted in the US are. A design patent protects an invention that the important aspect of the invention is the design itself, not necessarily the function. So in this case, it protected the actual appearance of this newly designed Medal of Honor. And that prevented other organizations from being able to use the design or portions of it in their own metals, cut down on this copycat or pirating aspect, and really protected the integrity of that design for future service members who received the medal. So the design patent was in effect for a period of 14 years. Once that 14 years was up, Congress actually passed a law to protect the design of the Medal of Honor. So it was protected in perpetuity after that. And what is now granted as the Medal of Honor still has the vast majority of our current Army Medal of Honor is still George Gillespie's 1904 design. So that kind of, for me, this speaks to just the aspect of how different inventors and different innovations can approach solving a problem. And it also shows that not all inventions are necessarily STEM focused or kind of science based, but there are inventors from all different types of backgrounds trying to solve their problem with inventions and then intellectual property protection to back that up. So if you want to learn a little bit more about how the Medal of Honor was designed, I think we're going to pop a link to a longer story in the chat about the Medal of Honor. That's part of our Journeys of Innovation series here at the USPTO. Every month we have a focus on an innovator who was looking to solve problems and change the world. And we also actually coincidentally have one on Art Fry, who Jan mentioned earlier, the inventor of the Post-it. He's 94 and still inventing, which is very impressive. So yes, thanks. That's the story I brought, but I'm really excited to hear more from everyone on the panel as well.
Thanks, Rebecca. And it really is a good illustration of the invention being such a broad term. I have started to teach a course in uniting design and functionality, and it does really kind of open up your mind in terms of thinking about the breadth. I grew up in my professional life thinking that inventions were all utility patents, and that's just not the case. These days, I'm really intrigued by inventions in different areas. And one of the things I do say, I travel around the world, and people these days right now think, if it's got to be AI, if it's AI, then boy, it must be inventive. And I think that's fine, and there's a lot of interesting things going on in the AI domain, but there is so much going on today, right now, with inventions being made to improve plant varieties, how to plant cotton seeds. I mean, all kinds of things. I'll just throw this out then for any questions that you as panel members have for any of us, any of the panel members, me, anyone. If you'd like to raise a particular question or make a comment, now would be a good time. And also, while you're thinking about that, anyone in the audience, please send a question if you'd like to direct it to any one of the panel members or just in general.
I have a question. Another type of invention I love is something that's inspired by nature. So I was wondering if anyone had any cool examples from their experience of inventions inspired by the natural world.
I can jump in a little bit here. I've been fortunate over the past 3 years to be engaged in Cornell's new design tech department, which is housed in the Art and Architecture College. And there's a lot of work going on there involving biomimicry as kind of as a basis for design and invention, using, for example, bone, the lumen of a bone, very structurally sound and light, to design architectural features. I've worked with the department chair, Jenny Sabin, she really specializes in a lot of bio-inspired creations. For example, last year I worked on a project with her involving, let's call it agrivoltaic. This is a system that is basically a photovoltaic system, but it's got some inspiration from sunflowers, and also if some of you might be aware of the lithops plant. It's a very simple plant that they look like fingers, and they have lenses on at the distal end. And she and her co-inventor have been using those inspirations to create a new kind of again, agrivoltaic system, which is photovoltaic combined with some agricultural application for the light that passes through. Anyone else that has any experience with any bio-related?
I am aware of kind of an interesting connection, which is with scallops and scallop eyes. Scallops have hundreds of eyes, and unless you see a picture of all their little blue eyes sticking out from the shell, you may not be aware of that. But I know that there are there's optics research related to studying scallop eyes, because they've evolved in a very different way from mammal eyes. And so figuring out kind of the origins of sight, but then also, people study these for modern electronics and modern optics as well.
I'm aware of a number of inventions over the years which have been inspired. I immediately remember the shark skin suits, the shark skin swimming suits that were able to penetrate, or they were streamlined through water so effectively that they ended up being banned from the Olympics because they made people swim too fast. One that I remember.
Talking about Olympics, there might be an example of, if you've ever been to Munich, there's this famous roof construction on the Olympic Stadium in Munich, which looks like a tent. And the architect, Frei Otto, he was inspired by leaves and trees and all this, and was kind of creating a kind of biomorphic architectural design. And that was like inspired by nature as well, yeah.
Anyone else of the panel, any additional story or a question that you think we all ought to address? I do have a question from our audience, but if you guys have a question or a topic you'd like to raise, now would be a good time for that.
I guess one more thing I'd like to say that comes up a lot when I talk to inventors is they don't necessarily feel like they invented anything new because they are building off of the work of so many others. Like, even though to me what they did seems like a really cool new invention, they're like, well, I'm just making this small improvement over what someone else did. And so this is, I think, a lot of the times, there's this kind of idea or a stereotype of the inventor, having this eureka moment and running around and shouting about it. But a lot of the time, it's this iterative kind of building on the work of others that gradually becomes something new and exciting that people pay attention to.
Yeah, indeed. I will say that most of the inventions I've worked on over decades are, let's call them incremental. They are improvements. They're mostly relatively slight. They can have a big impact. And that's why I say at the outset, most of the inventions, they're surrounding us, all around us. Most inventions are not huge, transformative paradigm shifters. They do happen, but they're rare. And actually, like I mentioned with my experience with the LED it was a disruptive technology, and it made it very difficult. The systems were not ready for LED, and so it went nowhere. And what I learned later was that the inventors of other enabling LED technology they were clever enough to realize that rather than trying to enter into the infrastructure of internal lighting, they would make toys and key fobs, which was a lot easier. I had not thought about that. But one of the things I really like to see, and I work with a lot of inventors, and they will come up with inventions that are not going to be viable. They're not going to move forward for one reason or another. But I always applaud the inventors for inventing and encourage them to continue to invent. And I frequently quote Linus Pauling, the Nobel laureate who discovered the alpha helix. And Linus Pauling once said, if you're going to have good ideas, you have to have a lot of ideas. And this is what I tell young students, young kids, think and think without worrying about the mistakes you will make along the way. Because inventors need to feel free to make mistakes. Any other comments or questions from our panel before I ask the question of the audience?
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of piggybacking off of Catherine's point about kind of this iterative process, and I think that's something that surprises people about invention a lot. One really great example of that sticks out to me is something that seemed like a small improvement but had a huge impact on society. There was a microbiologist named Benjamin Rubin who invented the pronged vaccination needle in the 1960s. And that pronged vaccination needle was the final push to help humanity eradicate smallpox worldwide. And basically the smallpox vaccine has been something that people have been working on refining since 1796. But the vaccine itself was really difficult to administer, and especially in less developed areas. So smallpox was continuing to kill millions of people worldwide. And what Benjamin Rubin did is he took another invention, which was the eyelet of a sewing machine needle, and he ground it down until he could push it into a fork shape, and that invention became the pronged vaccination needle. And the difference of that it created was it allowed for just a tiny droplet of the vaccination serum to be administered very easily and very with only a couple of jabs. And that really was that final push that was needed to allow worldwide smallpox vaccination. And because of that, smallpox is the first disease that humanity has ever been able to eradicate. So again, it seems like it's literally physically a small invention. It seems like something that is kind of coming at the end of this centuries long kind of journey into human progress, but it kind of culminated in an unparalleled victory that made everybody safer across the globe. So that one really sticks out to me as something that's not only kind of characteristic of the inventive process. It's very rarely just one inventor coming up with a breakthrough on their own. But it's also something that's inspiring because so many people had worked on this problem, and we actually kind of collectively throughout history, throughout this long duration, were able to solve the problem to the extent that now we can say smallpox was instead of smallpox is, which I find very inspiring personally.
Yeah, a small invention, and yet what a huge impact. A couple of thoughts here. One is we didn't even get into this whole idea of, this device here has thousands of inventions in it. And, these days that is another factor where we have, the confluence of a number of inventions, materials, methods, et cetera. One last story, I love this one, and I'll just tell you about, inventions that are dead ends, so-called dead ends. And it's the story of when Napoleon wanted to invade North Africa, and he put some of his scientists to work on developing a way to measure bad air. Back then, the idea was bad air or malaria caused disease. They hadn't made the connection yet that it was caused by mosquitoes being a vector for a pathogen. They just thought, the scientists of the day thought that it was the bad smell that came from swamps, which was basically hydrogen sulfide based gas, so it smelled bad. And so the scientists came up with a method for measuring bad smell, which was a small handheld device where they would fill up the, like a little handheld, kind of like a Derringer, a pistol-like affair, and they would then put a cork in it and pull a trigger, and it had a spark, and the spark would ignite the methane in the chamber, and then a cork would fly out, and it could then measure the distance, and that would allow you to calculate what was the methane, and they said the bad smell. So they had bad smell maps made using this device. Well, we now know that bad smells don't cause disease, and we don't really need to measure bad smell. But an inventor in the UK said, oh, this idea of internal combustion makes sense. So in this case, it was a dead-end invention which actually spawned the creation of something much more meaningful, the internal combustion engine. Yet one more, there are just so many aspects to inventions that are just kind of eye-opening, the spirit of, human creativity. Here's a question from Nikki in our audience. AI was mentioned. We know that the current impact of cell phones, social media, and AI can impact brain development. Do you all think future young talent will be positively or negatively impacted by these resources? What do you think? Social media, cell phones, AI, are we headed in a positive direction or negative direction, in my words? What do you think, panel members?
This is something I have written about extensively. I write a lot about AI for young people. And I wrote a story about AI in education soon after ChatGPT came out. So it's something I think about all the time. And I honestly don't know yet. I go back and forth. I tend to be a hopeful person. So I want to believe that, we'll create a future that is positive for young people. I mean, that's one thing I come back to a lot in my thinking and writing, is that the future isn't something that happens to us. We create it, and we created AI, and we're going to decide how we want to use it and how we want our kids to use it. And our kids are going to decide how they want to use it. And so if they really embrace that and learn how it works, they can maintain their human creativity and their human inventiveness and put AI to work to help them achieve their goals rather than stunting their growth and creativity. So in the end, I'm an optimistic person, and I really hope that's going to be the outcome. But it is a scary thing, and there is a lot of real concern and valid concern about, especially, young adults going into the workforce, and, are there going to be jobs for them? Are there going to be roles for them? I think right now the answer is yes, but it is, I think, a valid concern. But again, like I said, I like to be optimistic about this.
Thanks, Catherine. Others?
Yeah, taking a historical view, I come to a similar conclusion to Catherine. I think that looking back at history, the telephone was going to ruin people's ability to write letters, the radio, the television, like everything. All of these major kind of communication inventions in particular were seen as the death knell of something else. And what really I think is important to understand about invention, and what we see kind of that reflected throughout the historical record, is no invention in and of itself is a positive or a negative on society. It's what people choose to do with that invention. The inventor of the Gatling gun thought it was going to reduce the size of armies. So that's a negative example, but not exactly how it ended up playing out. But I think that what we kind of have to realize is that we all have agency in this story. So we have the ability to shape and refine and utilize inventions as we as a society want to do so. So it's really up to us, I think, in the end, just as Catherine said, but kind of taking more of that historical view, whether or not AI becomes something to aid, which there's a lot of invention. I'm not going to speak to them necessarily because it's not my wheelhouse, so I don't want to step out of my lane, but there's a lot of inventions that are positively using AI in conjunction with human knowledge to advance medicine, for example. But it's really going to depend on how our society interacts with the technology, just as it has for hundreds of years.
Thanks, Rebecca. Jay, any comments, or Jan?
No, I'd agree. There's many things to be optimistic about, but also many things to be pessimistic looking at these things. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
I agree with most of with everything really that's been said. And I guess I would add that the fact that we're having these conversations and the fact that we're aware of some of the risks to mental health, for example, or just brain function, is a reason for optimism because we know that these are very powerful tools, and hopefully we can use them wisely.
Well, maybe, thank you, Jay. It may go back to a little bit of what I was saying before we started the show, which was I've had people say to me, when I've said, I think we could increase the number of inventors through education and various cultural things, especially with young folks, children, and they've said, oh, that would be bad because not all inventors invent for good. And that gave me some moment of pause because I never really confronted that before, but I guess that's the case too. But I think maybe we need to make sure we're, also including some ethics and, discussion of, what is the public good and how do we stay in adherence to that? Yeah, I mean, when it comes to AI, there's lots of positive and some worrisome elements of it. So interesting to end on such a puzzling note. And I'm glad we have raised the issue, and it maybe now just confirms what I thought, which was this was probably just the beginning of a longer conversation. So thanks to all of you, my panel members. Thanks for taking the time and sharing, your ideas and your inspirations with the audience. And there's some other questions here. I guess maybe we'll send them out. Somebody wants to know how to plant cotton. So maybe we can figure out a way to get some answers to the audience. Thank you, everyone, for this inaugural session on inventions.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.